Your Honor, a teacher is a person who helps students to acquire knowledge, competence, or virtue via the practice of teaching. And this is exactly what Jeffrey Clayton did not do. Jeffrey Clayton took advantage of his position. Jeffrey Clayton took advantage of young girls. Jeffrey Clayton irreparably damaged ER and others. Jeffrey Clayton agreed that in lieu of additional charges being filed against him, additional victims who suffered at his hands could speak. He then asked Your Honor to essentially disregard their statements in his sentencing memorandum. But they should never be disregarded and should be carefully considered in determining what is an appropriate sentence for this defendant. This defendant who alleges he is sorry, he has made a mistake, he's a first-time offender, and that this is an isolated incident. It is none of those. This defendant did not make a mistake. He made choices. A choice is an act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities. And this defendant made poor choices. He made criminal choices. He chose to pursue ER, to take advantage of her, all while in a position of authority over her, all while being her teacher, the person who throughout the day stands in the place of a parent, calling her in the very early hours of the morning, conversations for significant periods of time, voluminous texting all the time, grooming ER over an extended period of time. And he knew it was wrong. And how do we know this? His own text messages. I just wanted to remind you that we should probably keep our text messages deleted. It means if they take our phones, it won't be tonight's messages that get us in trouble. It will be all the other ones that came before. This defendant knew he was in the wrong. This is not an isolated incident. This is not a first-time offense. This is not a question of, after all of these years of teaching, how did we get here? Because how do we know this? You heard not only from ER, you heard from CD, BL, and JC. And what did they tell you? This has gone on for years. BL told you students questioned why she would want to take a class with the defendant, that other students would in their own way try to warn her. And ER told you she was warned about the defendant's reputation. This is not something that just happened. This is a defendant who at 65 years old decided that he would manipulate and attempt to foster a romantic relationship with a 16-year-old child. He would talk to that child about things that a teacher should in no way talk to a child about. Speaking with her in the early hours of the morning. Luring her with private lessons. Private lessons in his home, away from prying eyes. And in violation of school board policies. This is a defendant who is asking this court to essentially excuse his behavior and to not further punish him because he's won awards during his career. Awards he won while making other children's lives hell. The defendant also points to other cases, both in and out of this jurisdiction, as justification for why he should get the minimum sentence. We are not here to relitigate cases that we know nothing about the facts of, what went on behind the scenes. We are here to litigate this case, because all cases are different. No two cases of this nature are ever truly identical. Every case has its own issues that affect the decisions on what is an appropriate outcome in those cases. So simply because one defendant got a specific sentence in a jurisdiction based on a specific set of facts, in no way means that every case should be judged on the same level. The defendant at this point is essentially asking this court to compare apples and oranges. Your Honor should look at what this defendant has done, what this defendant should be sentenced to, not what other defendants have received in other cases. And to one point that was stated during defendant's first closing, he did agree in the plea agreement to not seek a downward departure. It wasn't something that was included in the terms of the plea. Now, several of the letters written in support of the defendant asked for mercy because he's lost his wife, his sons, his family, his friends, his pension, his honor, and his reputation. The defendant lost those things because of his own choices. The defendant lost those things because of his criminal acts. He chose to commit those acts. That does not mean the defendant gets the minimum sentence. That means there are consequences for actions. And now this defendant must be appropriately sentenced for those crimes, to which he has pled guilty. And that appropriate sentence is 15 years in Florida State Prison, to be followed by 15 years of probation, with the sex offender conditions as outlined in the addendum to